from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. Happy to be with you guys. Our phone number, if you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, feel free to do it, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And Alejandro Mayorkas, he's the DHS Secretary of Homeland Security. He was in the hot seat today. We're going to get to him in a moment. Plus, we've got a headline here I want to share with you. Elon Musk says that Republicans were censored on social media, at least on Twitter, at 10 times the rate as Democrats. And that was Elon Musk making this revelation to Joe Rogan on a podcast with him. And, I mean, you know, disappointing but not surprising, right? This is the degree to which Twitter simply was an arm of the government. And it's not very well understood by the public, Musk said, in response to Rogan bringing up the Twitter files that were released in late 2022 and through the beginning of this year. He compared it to the Soviet news agency Pravda and said that Twitter was a state publication. And, you know, I've always suspected that. I suspect that of CNN. I suspect that of the Washington Post. I suspected of a number of things that we end up calling the mainstream media, right? And this is sadly what it is. It is what it is. And Mayorkas was in the hot seat. So was Christopher Wray earlier today. I want you to hear the first one from Mayorkas. He's being questioned by, by Senator Rand Paul, asking him if the government, if the Department of Homeland Security is meeting with social media companies for the purpose of instructing them to take down specific content that the administration doesn't like. Now, you remember earlier this year, a court admonished the White House and the Department of Justice and a bunch of other agencies for doing just that, for having social media companies take down content, in particular during the time of COVID, because they were saying, you know, something that went against the government's narrative, and they were saying, take that down and censor them. And that happened. It happened to me, so I know it was happening. But I want you to listen to Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas with Senator Rand Paul. Check this out.
Secretary Mayorkas, is DHS still meeting with social media companies to discuss content moderation?
Ranking Member Paul, you and I have discussed this before. We do not meet with social media companies for the purpose of instructing them to take down content.
You have never had any meetings with the social media companies to discuss content moderation?
What we have done in the past, Ranking Member Paul, as I shared with you previously, is we, along with other federal agencies, have met with social media companies in a public-private partnership to speak of the threats to the homeland so that those companies are alert to them.
Do you think a threat to the homeland is a discussion of vaccine efficacy?
I do not, Ranking Member Paul. And
if you'll have your staff read, and I think it'd be good for you to read also the Missouri versus Biden case, it lists time and time again discussion of constitutionally protected speech that has nothing to do with national security. So when you say you didn't meet to do with that, yes, you were meeting, you just disagree with the characterization of it. Were you meeting with social media companies to discuss content moderation? And your answer to that is no?
My answer.
That's the specific question. Did you meet with them, and were you meeting with them to discuss content on the internet?
My answer remains the same, Ranking Member Paul.
More beating around the bush, more obfuscation from Mayorkas. And listen, you get the same thing when you ask Christopher Wray right? That's his name, Director Christopher Wray from the FBI. Senator Paul ripped into him as well. And I got to tell you, good on Senator Paul. Did a great job with this. And you remember back when the FBI was buying information they could never legally obtain. So they would go to Twitter or whoever, and they would buy your data so they could have access to it. And then they would know where you are, geolocations, things like that, without ever getting a warrant. Because social media companies take it because you signed that terms and conditions saying, I agree. But you wouldn't just give that up to the government, right? Most people wouldn't. But they were able to get it without getting a warrant. And obviously this skirts the Constitution. It skirts one's rights. But this is what they were doing. And there's more to what they were doing. And Rand Paul asked them today about, did the FBI actually ever pay Twitter to moderate content? Now, we know that they've paid them to get certain information on certain users. Listen to what FBI Director Wray had to say to Senator Paul.
Director Wray, did the FBI pay Twitter money to moderate content moderation?
I'm not aware of us paying money to moderate content there or anywhere else.
What was the $3 million for that the FBI gave that's been revealed in Twitter files, which has been characterized by those writing the Twitter files as payment for content moderation? Basically, they said Twitter, you guys were meeting with them all the time and you had them taking down so many posts. They said, well, gosh, it's a lot of work. Why don't you pay us? And so you did. You paid them $3 million. Are you aware of the payment?
Well, I'm not aware of that specific payment, but I can tell you that when it comes to payments, going back well over 4 decades, when we are required by federal law, when a company, like in this instance a provider, goes through expenses to produce information, we're required to reimburse them for those expenses. And so I think that a lot of the questions about payments revolve around exactly that.
So that's a roundabout way of saying, yeah, exactly, right? If the FBI comes to Twitter and says, hey, listen, I need you to take down this. I need you to take down that. I need you to make sure this guy, you got to shadow ban this guy, make sure he's only talking to himself, thinking that he's reaching hundreds and thousands or millions of followers. Nope, not happening. And then Twitter turns around and says, listen, if we're going to be doing all this dirty work, we got to put everybody on overtime. We're going to have to put a whole team on this. This is going to cost a lot of money. Our payroll is going to be, $2.8 million. You're going to have to foot the bill on that. They said, no problem. We'll give you $3 million. Right. And he actively goes and says that when they have to do these things well over 4 decades, what Twitter was around 4 decades ago? This guy's a liar, embustero. Anyway, when we are required by federal law, when a company says, like in this instance, a provider goes through expenses to produce information, we are required to reimburse them for those expenses. And so I think that a lot of that, of the questions about the payments, revolve exactly around that. So yes, it revolves exactly around what Senator Paul was saying, content moderation. Twitter got $3 million in taxpayer dollars. Why? To shut you up, to censor your speech. And all we got to do is look at that Missouri v. Biden to see how the judge came down on that. Hopefully they keep pulling on this thread and they keep shaking the tree and see what else comes out of here, because this is the type of thing that should never happen in this country. Anyway, I want to get into a bunch of things tonight. I just wanted to kind of wet your beak a little bit with that topic. We're also going to find out what's going on from a national security perspective with the latest goings on in Gaza. Of course, we're going to talk about Hamas meeting with Russia. And we're also going to find out what's up with Gavin Newsom hanging out in China. Anyway, there's a lot to discuss, plus your calls and more right here with me, Rich Valdez. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Does President Biden think the anti-Israel protesters in this country are extremists?
What I can say is what we've been very clear about this. When it comes to anti-Semitism, there is no place. We have to make sure that we speak against it very loud and be very clear about that. Remember, what the president decided when the president decided to run for president is what he saw in Charlottesville in 2017, when he saw neo-Nazis marching down the streets of Charlottesville with vile anti-Semitic just hatred. And he was very clear then, and he's very clear now. He's taken actions against this over the past 2 years, and he's continued to be clear. There is no place for this type of vile and despite this kind of rhetoric.
So Karine Jean-Pierre can't identify what an extremist is. Joe Biden says he's bouncing checks, and all sorts of things are crazy in the U.S. And I want to really get a sense of what's going on with this, because we're in, I think, day 22, 23 of this conflict where Hamas murderously attacked Israel, and this seems to be spreading. We've got the proxy attacks that are happening in Syria and other places by way of Iranian drones and whatnot, striking U.S. military installations, or at least installations where there are troops. And people keep talking about a ceasefire and keep talking about peace, yet it doesn't seem like that side is pursuing any peace. So I want to bring in one of the pros, former Deputy National Security Advisor in the previous administration. She's a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Victoria Coates, welcome back.
Rich, it's good to be with you.
Thank you.
Difficult times, but glad to be here.
Yeah, I hear that. What do you make of what's going on right now? I know there's a lot of talk about peace, but how do we get to peace when we're still in the midst of all the conflict?
Well, this is kind of the million-dollar question, and something that's flown a little bit under the radar that your listeners may be interested in is last night, the Houthi in Yemen fired off a ballistic missile toward Israel. You can say, why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because it's the first time anyone's fired a ballistic missile at Israel since 1991, when Saddam Hussein did it as the first Gulf War kicked off. So this is a huge escalation, and a new missile defense system, Arrow 3, which is a joint U.S.-Israeli system, was activated for the first time and intercepted the missile. And the good news is it worked, and the bad news is it was activated. So we can look at the situation in southern Israel and the horrific attacks of Hamas on innocent Israelis and Americans. But what's really happening here are the Iranians are ramping up these much more significant attacks to try to engage both Israeli and American systems and overwhelm them. So this is just a really, really dangerous situation, and the administration seems kind of stuck in the past.
Victoria Coates, you have a significant pedigree. You worked in the White House. You're at Heritage, and you get this a lot better than I do. I'm a kid from Brooklyn that talks on the radio. To me, it seems like the Iranians are sticking their middle fingers up at us and taunting us. Am I looking at this the wrong way?
Well, bear in mind, I also have a PhD in art history, but the Iranians are bullies. They're going to push and push and push. That's what they've been doing for more than 40 years. They spend their time chanting death to America, death to Israel. Now, what they've made very clear is when they can achieve that, they will do it. And this administration, like the Obama administration, is trying to make friends with them. They're trying to make them reasonable. They're trying to make them good faith interlocutors with whom we can make some sort of a deal. And it's just irrational. It's not who they are. They want us to die. And
right.
I don't know how to put that in a nice way, but if you keep trying to explain to them why their lives would be better if they cooperated with us, if they got economic relief, all they're going to do is take that economic relief and pour it into this kind of activity. You can draw a direct line between when the Biden administration came in, stopped enforcing these sanctions, started giving money to the Palestinians, that's what they used. 2.5 years later, we have the biggest attack on Jews in a single day that we've had since the Holocaust.
The math makes sense to me. So, again, these guys are waving the proverbial friendship finger at us, and they're the schoolyard bully. And you've got some people that stand up to bullies and others that try to befriend them and joke around and try to de-escalate, maybe Obama, maybe Biden. Obviously, this is a horrible approach. It's setting the Middle East on fire. It seems like everywhere you turn, everybody's talking about, is this the beginning of World War III? My question is not so much World War III, but you can answer that if you'd like. But my question is really, is it a question of not if, but when we strike Iran? Is that what's on the table?
Well, this has always been, for those of us who tangle with the Middle East in a regular basis, and, what's been really disappointing to me over the last 3 weeks is we had made real progress towards peace under President Trump and towards making the situation better. And we've watched the Biden administration tear that down over the last 2.5 years. And that's very, very hard. And, for those of us who have been somewhat skeptical of the administration's engagement in Ukraine, one of the reasons has always been because those of us familiar with the Middle East always know this is possible. And that in the case that there's a situation that involves Israel, it's Israel and the United States or Israel alone. The Europeans aren't going to start writing big checks for Israel. So if the United States is the main funder of Ukraine and something happens in the Middle East, we will also by force be the main funder there. And we've created this situation now where we have a dependence from Ukraine. We have to be there for Israel. And we're also looking at Taiwan. And, it is kind of the world on fire, as you say. And nothing the administration is doing is tamping down any of these hotspots.
I blame Biden and his weakness. Again, from my studio, the way it looks like Biden has been out to lunch. They see weakness, they prey on the weakness. But the other side of that coin is maybe I'm being too generous with that analysis, and maybe it's really complicity. Maybe Biden really is friendly towards the hostility of Iran. Would that be an overstatement?
Well, I think it goes back to the Obama administration, and they did go in with a kind of new philosophy after the George W. Bush administration and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, that maybe a path to a more stable Middle East was the United States partnering with Iran and not being as supportive of Israel. And so they tried that, and they tried to deal with Iran, and they tried taking sanctions off Iran. And we saw what happened, which was money flowing into Tehran. It all went to military purposes. None of it went to the humanitarian or the rebuilding that they needed. And the region was on fire.
Folks, we're on with Dr. Victoria Coates from Heritage. She was the Deputy National Security Advisor during the Trump administration. We're coming right back with her to continue discussing the latest developments with the Houthis and everything going on in the Middle East and the world overall. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
As you've heard President Biden, Secretary Austin, and other senior U.S. leaders say, our message to any country or group thinking about trying to take advantage of this situation to widen the conflict is don't.
All right, that's General Pat Ryder saying that Yemen's Houthi rebels, as Dr. Coates just mentioned, have claimed attacks on Israel. And Pat Ryder, who's the Pentagon spokesman, that was his warning for any other adversaries that want to widen the conflict. Don't do it. I don't know if that was stern enough, from my opinion, but Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor at the White House during the Trump administration, Senior Research Fellow at Heritage Foundation. What's your reaction to what you just heard from General Pat Ryder?
Well, I mean, with all due respect to General Ryder, who made those comments before the Houthi shot off the ballistic missile last night, I mean, it simply hasn't worked. I mean, both General Ryder and Secretary Austin have tried to make this distinction between their retaliation for the some 24 hits that the Iranian proxies have taken at American, not Israeli, but American assets in Syria and Iraq over the last 3 weeks. They're saying that's different from what's going on in Israel. But yet the Houthi are saying, actually, we're going to fire another level of weapon at Israel. You guys are going to have to shoot it down. And then we're going to tell you that we're at war, the Houthi, we're at war with Israel because of what you're doing. And we hold the United States responsible. They don't differentiate between us. And we are trying to differentiate between Iran and its proxies. And we think that's somehow going to de-escalate. It's not. It's just going to embolden them. So, I worry that as much as none of us want to get entangled in another war in this region, that's what we're getting closer and closer to.
Now, the Houthi rebels out of Yemen seem to be another proxy of Iran's. Why does Iran have so many proxies? Why do they all hate America, or are they just hired guns?
I would say it's embrace the and there. They're both hired and they have been taught to hate America. That's what's convenient to them. So for the Houthi, they were sort of a ragtag group that couldn't gain a lot of traction until the Iranians decided they would start arming, equipping, and funding them, and made them a real problem for the Saudis and the Emiratis. But also, I think we're always looking not only toward the Arabian Peninsula, where those entities are, but also toward Israel and toward the Red Sea, where they could very effectively disrupt shipping. So if the Iranians could gain a toehold in Yemen, they can do a lot of damage to international commerce, and potentially, and just the way they can at the mouth of the Persian Gulf coming out, if they can disrupt energy coming out of the Gulf. So they kind of figured out a way to get a stranglehold on these two choke points. And instead of doing anything serious about it, the Biden administration has just let it happen. And one of the things we've watched go on over the last 2 years, 2.5 years now, almost 3 years, is the arms going into Yemen are so much more sophisticated than, because we actually, during the Trump administration, tried to stop this and prevent these arms from going in, but they've just turned a blind eye for it. They took the Houthi off the foreign terrorist organization list. And so they now have these killer drones. They have these ballistic missiles that they didn't have before. It makes them a much more deadly threat.
So right now they don't really have skin in the game, other than they might share some ideology and they're a hired gun, but not. It doesn't really make a difference the why, right? It's the what that's happening, and they're doing what they're doing with this ballistic missile. So now the Pentagon says they're moving assets into the region. Do you think that's a good move, and are we moving enough?
Well, it is good. It's good to have both the Ford and the Eisenhower carrier groups. We have another group in the Red Sea. This is positive in terms of supporting Israel. These are some of the assets. I mean, we are the ones who are shooting down some of these projectiles that are going in. It's not just the one ballistic missile, but at the same time, that means we're stretched very thin elsewhere. One of these carrier groups was supposed to be supporting the effort in Ukraine. So are we no longer supporting Ukraine? Have we reduced our position in the Pacific if China goes against Taiwan? it just seems like we're making a lot of trade-offs here. We're stretched extraordinarily thin. And for the last 2.5 years, nobody's been asking any of these hard questions about what we've committed to a theater like Ukraine.
Folks, we're on with Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And she's got a piece titled, Peace Won't Come Until Palestinians Accept That Plan A Doesn't Exist. I want to dig into that and more straight ahead. Plus, we're going to get to your calls momentarily. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. We're on with Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor in the previous administration and current Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. She also mentioned she has a PhD in art history. And Dr. Coates, I have to ask, how did you make this transition, if there was a transition at all, from art history and having a doctorate degree there to becoming National Security Advisor?
Well, there was a transition, and we can blame it all on Don Rumsfeld, of all people. It is literally his fault. I got my PhD and had gone on to teaching art history, but always had sort of a double track with politics and conservative issues. And when he retired from the Pentagon in 2006, was looking for an academic who could help him write his autobiography. And through a whole series of crazy circumstances, he lit on me and like literally one afternoon offered me the job. And I looked at him and said, yes. And that was it. How
cool is that?
And so went to work on Known and Unknown, which I strongly recommend. The Wall Street Journal about last month actually named it one of the 5 best political memoirs in history, which I just wish he were alive to have seen that, because it's a great book and it tells you everything you need to know about national security policy in the United States.
Yeah, Rumsfeld was a real staple in national security in D.C. And I remember years ago during the Iraq War, he made a statement that was so simple but yet so profound. And he told somebody, a reporter, I think it was a reporter, or during a hearing, they asked him a tough question, and he kind of pulled his glasses down a little bit, and he looked at him and he said, "Listen, you don't go to war with the army you want. You go to war with the army you have." And I thought, makes a ton of sense. You work hard to get that army that you want, but when push comes to shove, you do exactly what he just said. And he was a very bright man. So interesting. It's good. So Rumsfeld is to blame. God rest his soul. Yep. And here you are. And you've got this piece that you've written. It's on the Heritage website. Peace won't come until Palestinians accept Plan A doesn't exist. Walk us through that a little bit.
Well, and I think that's the key for people who are grappling with what happened on October 7th, because it was so shocking and horrific, the attacks on Israel. And we're all learning more and more every day about just the physical devastation that was wreaked by the Palestinians, and everyone has to keep thinking, how could thousands of people be trained to be this vicious simultaneously in a coordinated way? How is this possible? And it goes back to the fact, and this is from an essay from 100 years ago, from 1923, that Jabotinsky wrote, called The Iron Wall, which is that the Arabs, not being ignorant people or stupid people, but their plan A is always going to be the eradication of the Jews. And until you build that iron wall that convinces them that the Jews aren't going away, they'll never get to plan B, which is coexistence with the Jews. And so, I think we had talked ourselves into the illusion that this was happening, and certainly the huge advances under the Trump administration, under the Abraham Accords, that was real progress, because we had Arabs saying, okay, we're done with Plan A, we're going on to Plan B, we're going to figure out, not only do we not want to eradicate Israel, we don't want it to go away, we want to cooperate with it. That was great. But what we were shown on October 7th was the Palestinians are not there, and the Iranians who are paying their bills are not there, and they want to destroy the Jewish state. And that was just a real, I think, stark wake up for everyone, that things have not changed in the last 100 years. We have had these advances with some, but the Palestinians are absolutely not there. And what we have done as the United States, in terms of pouring billions upon billions of dollars into Palestinian causes, hasn't done any good. And we have to start to call that into question. We have to say, why are we doing this? I mean, what are these schools that we are funding, these United Nations schools? What are they teaching these kids that they can be this savage? Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe that makes me a bigot to even ask the question, but I have to ask. And why is the President of the United States asking for another $100 million for this in the wake of the attacks? It just doesn't make any sense to me, Rich.
Me either. I asked a similar question to Brigitte Gabriel, who was on the program recently, and she was telling us about her story as a kid and whatnot growing up in Lebanon. And she said, there's a lot of talk about differentiating Hamas from the Palestinian people. And she said, for me, it's not that stark of a difference, because it's those people that voted for Hamas. Do you feel that that's an appropriate statement? I've never been there. And I know that I didn't vote for Joe Biden. So if somebody were to tell me, well, Joe Biden's your president, that's your bad. No, it's not. I didn't. I voted for Trump. But my point is that the will of the people? Are they really in sync with the people, or are they radical crazies and the people are completely different, kind of like Iran?
Well, no, I would say there's a big difference there. And Brigitte is 100% correct. And the other thing is, just because you voted for Donald Trump doesn't mean you've taught your kids to hate Joe Biden.
Right.
So somehow, this entire generation of young people who were basically 15 to 23 were brought up so they could be this savagely angry with Jews. So these aren't the people who voted for Hamas. Their parents voted for Hamas, because nobody's been given an opportunity to vote in whatever it's been, 12, 15 years. These guys grew up indoctrinated in this hatred, and it couldn't have just been a small ruling class. I mean, this is the schools. It is the parents. We have the tapes of them calling their parents saying, "Are you proud? I killed 11 Jews with my hands."
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine calling your parents and saying that?
No.
No. This is a cultural program, and it goes back to the Jabotinsky thing. Until you convince them, it's not a persuasion anymore. And this is what I think the Israelis are trying to do. They have to surrender. They have to say, we lost. They have to say, the Jewish state is not going away. Then maybe we can get to progress. And, as counterintuitive as it may seem, there are some networks of Palestinian-Israeli economic cooperation in West Bank that could be a model, maybe, going forward for some sort of cooperation. But right now, what we need is abject surrender in West Bank, because otherwise they're just going to keep doing this.
Well put, and we'll leave it there. Folks, Victoria Coates, Dr. Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Trump and Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Let everybody know how they can keep up to speed with the analysis that you're putting together and all the great work you're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Rich. It's at Victoria Coates on Twitter, at heritage.org. And next time I'll come back and we'll talk about art history.
I love that. And I love the conversations with you. Really, you have a great way of breaking it down for folks like me that just want to, I'm just looking to throw a punch somewhere, because when things like this get out of hand, it's like, you just look for the bad guy, and it's a complicated thing, but clearly there is a bad guy. And like Netanyahu yesterday said, there will be no ceasefire. I think that's the approach you have to take. It's the only way to win.
100%.
Right?
You take
Fighting
care.
for your lives. Thank you. Godspeed. You're a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. And folks, we're coming right back with your calls and a whole lot more of what happened today in America. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And the Israelis have reported recently that they have claimed the life of one of the leaders that organized the origin of this attack, the October 7th attack. It's Daniel Hagari. He's Israeli commanding officer. Listen to this. Explaining how they got him at a refugee camp.
Many were killed here now, and infrastructure was destroyed. It's a complex situation. We lost competence in this. We advised that two soldiers of Israel who fell. This evening, we killed the Ibrahim Biali. Biari is the central head of the strip since we came in there. He also has he took part in the butchery of the October 7th. While he was killed, many others were killed as well. Many who were with him in the structure and underground as well, underneath the ground. The Biari caused other areas. There was a wide underground area which also collapsed. And from there, did the entire structure and infrastructure was destroyed, and many of them were killed. The Hamas terrorists still keep using the civilians intentionally in the most cruel manner as human shields. Sinwar doesn't care. Yehia Sinwar doesn't care about it. He built this infrastructure on purpose, intentionally under the homes of civilians, and is behind not only the butchery of Israel's of October 7th, but the one that is causing civilians of Gaza to get killed underneath those structures. There we again. We want them to ask the civilians to move south of Wadi Gaza, where they'll be safer. We are going to continue working over there. We'll continue acting there against every terrorist in the entire area of Gaza. In the Red Sea, a land-to-land missile was taken down by us.
Again, that's Daniel Hagari, is the Israeli commanding officer, announcing that the Hamas leader from the October 7th attack was killed at a refugee camp, and how they intentionally hide beneath civilian homes and use them as human shields. Very, very, I guess, good news, but it's just the beginning of many more that I guess have to topple in order for this to really come to a head. Folks, stay tuned. There's more to come straight ahead. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, Here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? Lots going on in the world. Putting a little focus on the world tonight because, I don't always pay attention to foreign policy, but it's kind of hard to escape lately, right? Try turning on a television. Everywhere you go, it's everything. The world is on fire, and I blame Joe Biden. I'm sticking by that. Anyway, welcome to the program. 866-505-4626 is our legacy line. That's open if you want to give us a call, or 833-4-VALDEZ. Looking forward to speaking with you guys. Now, I want to get into this really quick. We've got a report from WGN on the teen hostage that was being held by Hamas is finally home 10 days after her release. Check this out.
18-year-old Natalie Ranan and her mother Judith were kidnapped during the brutal Hamas attack on October 7th. They were visiting relatives in Israel at the time. The Consul General of Israel to the Midwest says he's relieved to see Natalie back home, and he shares in her family's celebration. But he's also thinking of the 239 hostages still held by Hamas. It is not confirmed whether Judith has also returned to Chicago.
That's courtesy, again, WGN. And, when you hear about a teenager being held hostage, you think, man, that's so young to be held as a hostage. And I was watching a report on Newsmax today. The youngest hostage being held right now is 9 months old, a baby. They kidnapped a baby. Absolute insanity what's going on. I want to talk about Hamas. I want to talk about the connection between Hamas and Russia and everything else that's going on in the world, because it seems to be getting uglier as the days go by. And I want to bring in one of my favorites here, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. He's president of the London Center for Policy Research, a retired spy, although I don't know if they really ever retire. Colonel, welcome, sir.
Hey, Richard. Yeah, we're like the mafia. We never completely retire. They always come find us if they need something. Trust me.
And you have like a code of omerta, right?
That's right. Yeah. So it just never ends. So I know this is probably a conversation for another day, but I was asked to create, and I did create a negotiation path to bring back Bo Bergdahl via the Pakistani ISI, and that was a full operation that was completely off the books, a whole separate story. But that's the sort of thing they come look for you for when they want you to do things that they don't want to talk about. So there you go.
That's great. Great story. Well, being that we're talking about hostages, although he wasn't necessarily a hostage, he was kind of a whack job. But yeah. When you look at stuff like this, in your estimation, and again, this is in Hollywood, so you could be as honest as you can be.
Sure.
What happens with these hostages? Do we get them back? Are they really going to use them to negotiate, or are they just going to kill everybody? And I hate to put it that way because I know there might be the families of some of the people that potentially are listening. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I just, my opinion of Hamas and the rest of these crazies in that region is that they're pretty aggressive people, to put it lightly. And I don't know that they want to play nice, because they don't play nice. Is that assessment accurate, or do you think I'm off base?
Yeah, I mean, it's the brutal truth that the chances of them coming back it's very slim. It's very slim because they are essentially bargaining chips, and they're fungible. And I'm sorry if people are listening to this, but if they're fungible, that means they're going to be spent in a way that Hamas believes it'll give them most benefit. And that could be trading them or murdering them. And that's the way they look at it. That is Hamas. There's no humanity. And I'm going to say this, you may not like it. I don't know if your audience will like it, but when you think of Hamas, think of the Nazis. It's a very similar limited view of how the world should be. The Hamas framework for the world judges people by the standards of their extreme interpretation of Islam. Very extreme. Militant Islam, political Islam. It's a political system. They use religion as a cloak to hide the pure evil of the totalitarian view of the world, that you will believe like them, you will act the way they believe you should act, and if you don't, you're an enemy and you'll be destroyed. That sounds like the Nazis to me, because the Nazis had a very similar take on how the world should work. And so when you look at the hostages, they're simply an asset that's going to be used to benefit they're a larger effort, and it's a very difficult situation for people to accept.
Now, we saw earlier this week, or it was, I guess, toward the end of last week, that some of the representatives of Hamas were flying out to meet with the Russians.
Right.
What do you make of that, and what's happened since?
So there's an effort by the Russians and the Chinese to work with the Iranians to do a number of things that we would be essentially affected by. First, China for long term, and Rich, this is probably a conversation for another night, really do want to upset the global world order of how things function. That is economics, social, just basically the way societies work in the world. That's why they're doing BRICS. That's why they're doing the Belt and Road Initiative, things like that. They're basically trying to change the way the world works. And the Russians and Chinese are working together on that. The Iranians are part of the larger team, if you will, that are going to facilitate that overall long-term movement. And if you then trace the Iranians to their efforts in the Middle East, what they're doing, there's been acknowledgement that the Russians and Iranians are working together on a number of things. The Iranians have provided drones and other military equipment to the Russians for their use in Ukraine. In exchange, the Russians have provided any number of things back regarding advice, assistance, and things like that, and obviously money. And the other thing that China's been providing to Iran is money by paying for their petroleum, for their oil, by the way, which should not be shipped to China because, it's prohibited. There's actually prohibitions about certain Iranian oil sales based on agreements that the UN has made and the U.S. has put on regarding sanctions. And then it all traces back to what is Iran doing to upset things in the Middle East. Well, they're supporting Hezbollah. They're supporting Hamas. They're doing things to kill Americans and kill our allies. And that's why you've seen the Russians meeting with Hamas. You've seen Hamas meeting with any number of people who would actually do these sorts of things to help support undermining one of our key allies in the Middle East, which is the Israelis. It's essentially all linked together in some form. It's just sometimes difficult to see the pieces in the light of day, but the pieces are there if you look close enough. And things are linked if you actually look at who's talking to who. One of the most notable things, which was way underreported here, is back when Joe Biden went over for his listening tour to listen to nobody and pretend he was in charge. Vladimir Putin was calling to al-Sisi, President al-Sisi in Egypt. He's called the King of Jordan, and he called the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and he even talked to Netanyahu to offer his services to be a mediator. So think about that. At the same time, the Russians are talking to the Iranians. The Russians are talking to our friends. So it's clear that no matter how you examine it, who's talking to who, the one party which is being pretty much ignored across the board is Joe Biden and his high school debating team, which pretends to be in charge of national security.
There's a report from the New York Post today. It says that Hamas won't let hundreds of Americans trapped in Gaza leave, and that's according to a statement from the Pentagon. And this is not necessarily hostages. This is others that are just there that are trying to leave. And it was reported a week or two ago that both Jordan and Egypt are not opening their borders for the people that are in Gaza. Yet somehow the Israelis are the bad guys, you and me are the bad guys, but the Jordanians and Egyptians are not the bad guys. How do people square these types of statements?
It's a difficult thing because part of this is, we had a really good relationship with Egypt, and we actually have bases in Jordan now that we don't fully acknowledge, but they're there. And look, Rich, I've worked with the Egyptians during the Trump administration. I actually went on a delegation with Bud McFarlane, God rest his soul, before he passed back in 2013, where we met with Egyptian leaders. And they were very interested in working with us on a number of things. And what ended up happening is that when Biden came in, there was an immense disrespect. And as a matter of fact, Tony Blinken going over and talking to the folks about the very issues you're talking about, he was rejected. And what's ironic is the State Department actually does readouts on these meetings. And in one meeting, President al-Sisi was actually lecturing Tony Blinken. So that's why you're seeing kind of this lack of enthusiasm to cooperate with us on anything, because they don't see the benefit and they don't respect Joe Biden. And if you don't respect people, they're not going to cooperate. So it's really that situation. It really comes down to that. And to your point, I think the Israelis are going to do everything they can to secure and help Americans get out of there no matter what. But you're just not going to count on a lot of folks who would otherwise be our friends and help us and stuff, because they don't like Joe Biden. They don't trust him. And I think he is the single point of failure in many of the policies right now.
You know, you mentioned Tony Blinken and your run-ins with him in the past. I don't know if he's a friend of yours, but I'll ask anyway.
No, he's not a friend. He's not a friend.
Okay, good. That makes it easier then. He strikes me as a real wuss and somebody that's not remarkably competent. From your run-ins with him, does that sound right?
He's completely incompetent, but he's very loyal. I mean, many of the folks that you see hired are hired one of three reasons: who they sleep with, what the skin color is, or their loyalty to the overall direction of the progressive Democrats. That's it. Those are the primary qualifications. Technical competence or personal capability is secondary to these other traits. And I cite for you Pierre Jean-Luc, whatever her name is one of the prime examples of incompetence. And, John Kirby, I know John. John is there because he is articulate and loyal to the party. And those things all pay dividends within their circles. And Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, they're there because they're more loyal to the Democrat Party and what the party promotes than the American people or their oath of office. And it's obvious. I mean, these things I'm saying, Rich, I think are abundantly provable by the facts of what we see before us as we observe their actions.
Yeah, I can't dispute that at all. Folks, we're on with Tony Shaffer, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, retired. He's the president of the London Center, and we're going to come back. I want to get his take from the intelligence perspective, and as a military man, we got the national security perspective on this before, but the Houthi rebels have thrown their hat in the arena. There's been a bunch of attacks on U.S. military installations or installations that are others and have or are housing U.S. military personnel. And I want to get your take on that, Tony Shaffer. So stick with us, folks. Again, the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
Between October 17th and the 24th, U.S. and coalition forces have been attacked at least 10 separate times in Iraq and 3 separate times in Syria via a mix of one-way attack drones and rockets. The New Jersey Air National Guard's 119th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron arrived within U.S. Central Command's area of responsibility today, with additional F-16 Fighting Falcon Squadron bolstering U.S. posture to deter further aggression in the region. As you've heard President Biden, Secretary Austin, and other senior U.S. leaders say, our message to any country or group thinking about trying to take advantage of this situation to widen the conflict is don't.
Pentagon spokesman Pat Ryder, General Pat Ryder, on what's going on with the rocket attack or the ballistic missile attack from the Houthi rebels and a number of drone attacks that have occurred. Looks like U.S. forces have been attacked 27 times in the last 14 days. Tony Shaffer, this sounds like a really bad situation. Do you expect this to get better anytime soon?
No, unfortunately, I don't. And, I like Pat a lot. I know General Ryder. I've worked with him in the past on projects, and he's been doing a good job of outlining what's going on. And obviously, we had the strike of the F-16s, but arguably, I don't think Iran, who's primarily driving those attacks, got the message. So I don't see it settling down anytime soon. As a matter of fact, what I think make it even worse is domestic strikes. Today, Chris Wray was in front of Congress. He actually made comments about the potential as violence increases globally. He does expect that Hamas or Hezbollah or some Iranian group may well attempt to do things here, which, and by the way, he did acknowledge there's been attempts by the Iranian intelligence service to conduct operations here before, which I've known, which many of us know. So it's not only the Middle East. We're talking about the potential of things coming here as well. And so it's a very serious time. Miscalculation and feckless diplomacy and somewhat less than effective airstrikes like the ones we did, the two targeted airstrikes against just two ammunition dumps, trying to warn the Iranians to not do more, followed up by General Second Def Austin saying, well, this is as far as we're going to go. We hope you don't do anything more. Just was not the right message to send to really back the Iranians off.
How is it that, the currency in Washington is obviously politics and favors and whatnot, but how is it that these guys are all a bunch of wusses? I'm overwhelmed by this. Like, as a kid growing up, every general was the most badass dude there was. And it's like all these guys, Austin, Milley, they're just pansies. I don't know. You might know them more than me, but from what I see, I think I would laugh at them if I were a general from an opposing army.
Oh, no, I know Austin, and I'm, I served for him in combat when he was a brigadier general. And I've said before and publicly, and he's in my book, Operation Dark Heart, I was not impressed then. I'm not impressed now. I think Milley, I know Milley. Mark made some huge mistakes. I hope he does well in his high heel modeling job post-retirement. I think he'll do well doing that. The last real general we had was fighting, his nickname said it all, Fighting Joe Dunford, who was, the the chairman of the Joint Chiefs before Milley. So we need someone like Dunford, who defeated ISIS. He was given guidance by President Trump, go defeat ISIS. He did it. We need generals like Norman Schwarzkopf, who's told to go beat an army and do it. We don't have those men because, Rich, the people we know in power are made very uncomfortable by men who are confident in their capability and have both the wits and strategic thinking to do something. It scares them. It actually... Yeah. It creates a fear that prevents them from actually hiring people to do the job. And instead you have this kind of stream of misery. So,
yeah, I want to get your take on something, and we're probably down to half a minute. But what do you think of the new Joint Chiefs chair, CQ Brown?
Don't know him. Some of my friends know him. We don't know. He's a bit woke, but we'll see if he figures it out before it's too late.
Amen to that. Folks, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, United States Army, retired. One of the best spies I know. LT, I want to thank you for being here. Check him out at the London Policy Center, And you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I'm sorry we ran out of time. Hope to have you back soon. Don't go anywhere. It's me, Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
You didn't bring up the issue of human rights directly to President Xi. You brought it up to the foreign minister.
And the vice president.
You know there are folks on both the left and the right who are disappointed by that. You clearly made a strategic choice to do that. What was your thinking there?
Well, with the foreign minister, it was in the meeting with Xi. I spent an hour with the foreign minister, and that was the appropriate venue on the basis of the conversations I had with the State Department and on the basis of the fact that that would be a better place to communicate a more nuanced and detailed explanation of our points of view on the issue of human rights and democracy, on issues related to Taiwan, issues related in international and foreign policy more broadly. And we took the limited time we had with Xi, which we were told would be just 20 minutes. And we had the opportunity to extend it to 45. And I didn't want to miss the opportunity in those 20 minutes
to reinforce the reason I was there. Not as President of the United States, not as Secretary of State, but as a governor of one of the largest states and one of the largest economies in the world, to focus on low carbon green growth. And I didn't want to miss that opportunity and moment to influence this foundational agenda, which is bigger than any situational agenda in our lifetime.
That's California Governor Gavin Newsom explaining why he was playing footsie with President Xi. Now, listen, I'm just kidding. People visit places all the time. Not necessarily China, but hey, I guess they'll take what they can get. To me, it seems like he's really taken a page from the Obama playbook when Obama went to Germany during his campaign. And now Gavin Newsom is allegedly not campaigning, but sure seems like he is. He's having his own debate versus Ron DeSantis in the coming days. And he's visiting with President Xi and other people, visiting China, and knocking down little kids in his basketball game, tackling them, then giving a little hug. It's just interesting to see how this is playing out. Meanwhile, our real president is, asleep at the wheel saying he's bouncing checks, and his vice president, Que Mala Eres, is doing absolutely nothing, doing a pretty bad job on TV interviews. So I want to get into this Gavin Newsom stuff and a couple of other topics with Cheryl Chumley. She's the online opinion editor and at the Washington Times and host of Bold and Blunt, a Washington Times podcast. She's also a best-selling author. Cheryl Chumley, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to be with you.
Thank you. Tell me a little bit about your initial reaction to Gavin Newsom's trip to China.
Well, that he's campaigning for president, right? That he is laying the groundwork to take over for the Democrat Party, because Joe Biden isn't going to be able to physically make it for another run for the White House. But look, I think the fact that he went over there and was basically kissing the butt of the Chinese Communist Party's leader,
right,
sort of makes him ineligible to be a White House leader in America. The two, America the free and China the communist, they're not compatible in any way.
And he mentioned that in his comments that we just played, saying that he wanted to talk about the cultural differences and whatnot, about human rights, and it was eerily reminiscent to Joe Biden in a CNN town hall when he was running for president, where they talked about the genocide on the Uyghur Muslims, and he basically said, look, it's kind of everybody's different cultural practices, and he was almost seemingly defending the Chinese for their human rights abuses. And it seems like Gavin Newsom's in the same boat. Where does that come from? Why is it that I thought the Democrats were the more liberal ones that were all about defending human rights?
Well, not when money is concerned, right? And the Democrat Party of today is much more aligned with the Communist Party than with American principles. Look, the Democrat Party of today is not like the Democrat Party of JFK days, and it's certainly not like the Democrat Party even of Bill Clinton days, because Bill Clinton, for all his leftist policies and his moral depravities, he still did not hate America. The Democrat Party of today actually hates America and actively seeks to undercut it. And they work with globalists, they work with far leftists to bring about the same sort of top-down governance that the Communist Party in China does. And if Gavin Newsom was so concerned about human rights abuses, he, first off, wouldn't have gone over there to fawn over Xi. But second off, he wouldn't talked about how it was all about the meeting of turning the page, renewing the friendship, and collaborating, forming partnerships and so forth for economic opportunities between China and California. He would have brought up human rights abuses at the forefront, which basically would have dampened any sort of friendly relations on economic opportunities.
And, of course, he's not doing that because he wants to ingratiate himself with the CCP, and I guess that makes sense from his perspective. That doesn't really help any of us here in the United States, especially when you're kind of a coastal place. The last state I want being friendly with China is the one that's on the Pacific, right? Like California. Hey, guys, come on in. I got you. I run the ports. It's the last thing we need. It really is. Now, I want to, I guess, get your take on, to me, again, it seems Newsom's positioning himself for president. I've been asking a lot of people the same question. A, do you think Joe Biden sees this through and secures the nomination, or is this something where he either bails out on his own or there's a contested convention where they put up Gavin Newsom? What's your take?
It's an interesting question because, honestly, I've heard a lot of people say that they don't think Joe Biden is going to make it, and they don't think the Democrat Party wants Joe Biden, and polls certainly support that. But at the same time, I think the only thing that would stop Joe Biden from securing the Democrat Party ticket would be Joe Biden's help, would be if it was absolutely impossible to medicate him enough so that he could stand by himself at the podium for even 30 seconds to say his thank yous. He would have to be gone so far down that path of medical degradation. And I think the Democrat Party truly likes Joe Biden. The Democrat Party, the membership that matters, the ones behind the scene pulling the strings, they like Joe Biden because he's completely pliable. He is the face that they can throw out there to sell the globalist vision and to pretend like he stands for America principles when all along he's not strong enough to resist the globalist agenda that gets forced through him into this White House and throughout America that we've seen over the last 3 years. And I think that is something that is very enticing to the powers who be behind the Democrat Party cloak right now, and they don't want to let it go.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if they don't let it go, then that means it's Biden 2024 and Biden v. Trump repeat. Do you think we get a different outcome this time around?
My gosh, I sure do hope so. I don't understand how Joe Biden, as abysmal as his poll showing is right now, and that includes with Democrats and with this so important independents, right? I don't understand how it can be as high as it is. He's still not as low as Jimmy Carter was at his lowest point. And the fact that Joe Biden is just so feckless to put Jimmy Carter as something that we would rather have Jimmy Carter at this point than Joe Biden. It's just amazing to me. So I would have to say my optimistic outlook would be that the American people would vote for Trump, whom I stand by. I still support Trump over Joe Biden, but the fact that Joe Biden still has that much support in the double digits is a little bit amazing to me.
Yeah, it amazes me too. And it also amazes me how he doesn't do bad in fundraising. And I think that's a big strength of his. He's able to pull in money, whether it's the power of the office, being the incumbent, or, that squint and flashing his pearly whites and the aviator shades. I don't know what it is, but he seems to be able to – he's the real Teflon Don, right? Nothing seems to stick to Joe Biden. I want to continue our discussion with Cheryl Chumley, online opinion editor at the Washington Times and host of Bold and Blunt, a Washington Times podcast. She's also the best-selling author of Lockdown. And we've done plenty of discussions on this program about COVID, and she actually wrote the book on lockdown. So you want to make sure you check that out. And we're coming right back with Cheryl Chumley, plus your phone calls and more straight ahead. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Y'all really want to try to say there aren't trans kids? Let me tell you what there aren't. There aren't cis kids, okay? You telling your child, oh, you're a boy, you're a girl. This is a child. This is a free spirit that has not learned any of that bullshit until you force it on them. So cisness is the wound. Cisness is the delusion. Cisness is the lie.
That is an activist from New York City who says that cisness is the delusion, and it is the prerogative of this particular activist that trans is accurate, trans is fluidity, trans is everything. He even goes on to say that God is trans in that particular clip a little bit later on in that audio. And our guest is Cheryl Chumley. She's the online opinion editor and host of Bold and Blunt, which is a podcast for the Washington Times. She's also the best-selling author of the book Lockdown. And Cheryl Chumley, I'm looking at a piece that you put out in this last week or so about a boy in Orlando, right? Orlando shame. Boy 11 parades in princess gown for LGBTQ crowd. And it seems to be becoming more and more commonplace to see young children identifying as the opposite sex, as if there was some sort of epidemic going on. What's going on here?
Well, parents are abusive to their children when they do that. When they let their children decide to become the opposite sex that God created them, and then they play into that lie, and then they feed the lie into their child's mind, and they allow that child to live that lie for years and years and years. To me, that's abuse, and I think these parents should lose custody of their children. So in this particular case, this boy, 11 years old, was actually the marshal of this parade, which is the largest LGBTQ pride parade, or one of the largest, that is held each year in the world. It was held in Orlando. And he became the youngest marshal, which, of course, the LGBTQ crowd lapped up and cheered and thought that was great. And his parents said that since age 5, he had been identifying as a girl and trying on girls' clothes and playing with girls' toys. And instead of doing their proper parental duty, which is to explain that, yes, children play with different toys and children experiment with different clothing, but that doesn't change the sex that you are. They allowed him to live life as a girl, and they profited off of it, right? They got fame and admiration and cheers and invites from the LGBTQ enablers and so forth. And so now their poor son is set up for life to live a life of a lie as a girl. And if you dare call out this lie as the lie it is, you're the one in this nation, in this crazy LGBTQ lunacy we have going on now, you're the one who is regarded as intolerant and as a bigot and so forth. So I think, though, we need to put our foot down and call out parents who allow little children who can't buy cigarettes, who can't get a tattoo, who can't even make their own dinner or decide a proper meal without parental input and parental permission, to allow them to decide that they've changed genders. It's abusive, and we need to call it out what it is.
I agree with that. Cheryl Chumley, I want you to stick with us when we come back. I want you to let everybody know how they could keep up to speed with all of the great work that you're doing, and tell us a little bit about your podcast. Folks, we're on with Cheryl Chumley. If you want to join the conversation, get your calls in for Open Phone America right now, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. We're on with Cheryl Chumley. She's the online opinion editor and host of Bold and Blunt. It's a podcast, both for the Washington Times. And Cheryl Chumley, tell us about Bold and Blunt. What type of podcast is it? Is it an interview thing, or are you breaking down your analysis? Tell us all about it.
It's both. The first few minutes is my analysis, and then every show I have a guest on for about 15, 20 minutes. And it's anything and everything that's going on in the world from a Christian conservative perspective. And my latest guest, as a matter of fact, was one that you had on your show, Tony Shaffer. So we shared that in
wonderful.
common. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, he's terrific. Now, how often are you recording, and how can people listen?
Thank you. They come out twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday, and you can listen at WashingtonTimes.com, and you can get it wherever podcasts are offered, Spotify, Apple, and so forth.
And if people want to read some of the articles, you do a great job with the opinion commentary that you put out there. Where do they go for that?
You can go to WashingtonTimes.com, and I have a newsletter there that comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can sign up for it, and it contains my commentaries. I write them every day, along with my Bold and Blunt podcast. Or you can go to CherylChumley.substack or CherylChumley.com. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I know the podcast game, and I know it's a grind, right? You know, on radio, you have the benefit, right, of knowing people, and it's live, so you can go to a call, you can do a lot of things. Things are happening in real time, but with podcasts, sometimes I feel it's harder. It's a harder job. It really is. It's funny. I do a 3-hour show 5 days a week, and I do a 1-hour podcast once a week. And I have a lot of trouble keeping up with that 1-hour podcast. It's the funniest thing. It really is. So Godspeed to you and kudos on that. And again, CherylChumley.com is the website. It's CherylChumley.com. Let them know how to find you on social media.
So I'm on X, formerly Twitter, at CK Chumley, on Instagram at CK Chumley, Facebook at Cheryl Chumley. What else is there? Truth at CK Chumley. Pretty much all the social media. You're getting the trend here, CK Chumley.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your insight with us tonight. Brilliant as always, and really a pleasure to speak with you. You are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I'm grateful that you stayed up late to chat with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
You bet. Godspeed. All right, folks, and Open Phone America is coming up. We're going to talk about everything we discussed tonight, plus everything that you want to discuss. You can throw it on the table. I don't say no to any topics. If it's a little crazy, I'll tell you it's crazy, but we'll still talk about it. So we're definitely going to get into that as well. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And if you missed any of the commentary you heard tonight, you can always go to the website, richvaldezamericaatnight.com, richvaldezamericaatnight.com. Keep it locked right here. Open Phone America starts right now. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And welcome to the program, Hour 3, Tuesday night. And I want to welcome you to the Open Phone America portion, Hour number 3, where we take your calls on just about everything we've talked about, anything you want to talk about. Happy to, hear your opinions, share mine, and have that conversation. If you disagree, we move you straight to the front of the line. If it's a first-time call, we also try to get you in kind of quickly. And forgive my voice. During the break, I made the genius move of trying to eat some flaming hot chicharrones, pork rinds. And one of them went down the wrong way. Oh, boy. So everything's on fire over here. So if I sound funny, that's why. Anyway, that's inside baseball for you. And I want to bring in some of the callers because there's a lot of you online right now, and I don't want to keep you waiting. Plus, my voice is going. So let's go to Tampa, Florida. Listening online, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. Let's check in with Edward. Edward, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yeah, Rich, thank you very much. Well, I wanted to bring up this to you and your listeners' attention. 5,000 caravan coming in through southern Mexico. And the Mexico National Institute of Migration, they're going to approve humanitarian visitor cards to pregnant women and close to 1,200 minors. So this is coming up north.
This is not good. And again, it's the main reason it's not good, obviously. We don't have space. You've got some of the bluest cities in the country, New York, San Francisco. Everybody's crying foul, saying, look, we have no more space. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, over, 6, 7, 8 months ago, he pulled up the garbage trucks and he was ripping down tent cities that were set up in New York City parks and on public property, saying, look, you can't have these parks here. And they were tearing everything down. I remember the videos. People were upset. The homeless were upset. They were saying, no, you can't put our home, our belongings in your dump truck. But that's what they did. Now, he's building tent cities and parks. And if there's nowhere to put people in New York City, then maybe we shouldn't keep letting people in. But lamentably, Joe Biden, he doesn't care. This is a man without principle. This is a man who's going to allow anything to happen. And, the law is one thing and reality is another. Right? It's like saying, look, you're not allowed to text and drive. That happens. You're not allowed to drink and drive. That happens. All sorts of things that aren't supposed to happen. Now, why do I say that, Edward? I'll tell you why. Because I've had the conversation on this program where people told me, well, they're bringing everybody in from the southern border because they want to make them vote in the next election or subsequent elections. And, of course, my gut reaction to that was, well, you can't do that because these people are citizens and citizens can't vote. And, of course, that's the law. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, right? And it would be naive of me to think that that is an impossibility. The reality is in Pennsylvania, they recently said, we're going to automatically register everybody who gets a driver's license. Now, let's pay attention for a second. If we're going to register everybody, and again, I don't know what the legal age is. Maybe one of our producers in the studio could check that out for me while we're having our conversation. But I know in New Jersey, you can get a permit at 16 and you can get your license at 17 on your birthday. Let's just use that standard. If you're 17 years old and you're now a licensed driver in Pennsylvania, then let us say that at 17 and you're automatically registered to vote, they're going to say something like, well, we're going to register you now, but you won't be able to vote till you're 18. Who's going to stop you if you're already on the voter rolls? Same thing if you're one of these states that says, hey, look, if you're a temporary migrant worker, we gave you a work visa. If you have a work visa, if you have an ID card, you have whatever they come up with, right? And they allow you to now have this driver's license or state ID or whatever it is, and you get automatically registered, whether you're a citizen or not, could eventually affect you. Now, listen, I argue against this saying, no. But when you go to get your license, they're going to check to see if you have a birth certificate or not. Again, in a perfect world, and in the world that I live in, that's how it is. But I could see the way we're changing the rules now where the border is wide open, the border agents have become travel agents, our cities are being overrun. What's left? Of course, you're going to have teenagers at 16 and 17 being able to vote, and you're going to have illegal aliens that are going to be able to vote. And until somebody figures it out and tries to reverse more of that, unless we stop it. And stopping it is not an easy task, right? It's a big ask. It's a tall order. So I think you're right when you point out this caravan of 5,000 people, women and children, some of them pregnant and others. This is clearly a problem that we can't afford. We don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to deal with this. But that's exactly the point. Just like Cloward and Piven. What's his name? Richard Cloward and Frances Fox Pivens, the communist married couple that are both professors. Their idea of overwhelming the system. This is how you overwhelm a system. You bring more people than they can possibly manage, and then you just overrun it. And this is something they've been talking about for years, and we're seeing it in action at the southern border. So I think you're spot on, Edward. Excellent call. How's the weather in Tampa?
It's 70.
Edward.
We'll be getting back to the 80s. Yeah.
Lose you.
Oh, I'm
well,
here.
I guess we lost Edward. Are you there? How's the weather in Tampa?
It's in the 70s. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I'm only asking.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be
it's
in
in the
Tampa,
70s.
but I'm going to be in Palm Beach tomorrow. I'm hoping
okay, well,
they say it's going to be 82. So I'm hoping for a little bit of a suntan.
You'll be fine. Okay, Rich. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Edward. I appreciate your call, man, and thanks for listening. Yeah, so tomorrow, I'm going to be in Palm Beach, and I'm going to a cocktail party. And I'm not a big drinker, but occasionally I'll have the Argentinian Malbec. That's a red wine, a little bit dry. I enjoy it. And that's usually my libation of choice. I don't really hit stuff too hard. I'm not really a whiskey guy. Occasionally, I'll be like a Tito's vodka guy, but that's on rare occasion. That's more like a Saturday night, not a Wednesday night in Palm Beach. But I will be in Palm Beach, so I may not make it in time for showtime. So you guys are probably going to be listening to Rich Valdez Greatest Hits, and we have been putting together a lineup of some of our favorite interviews that we've done over the last 6-7 months that I want to replay for you guys. So forgive me for the evening off, but I promise you I'll be having fun. I'm going to visit Mar-a-Lago, and I'll let you know all about it on Wednesday. So don't miss the show tomorrow night, and definitely don't miss it on Thursday night when I come back and tell you all about it. We're going to be checking out this new film that's coming out, and of course, the cocktail party. Anyway, there is more to come straight ahead. I'm going to be getting to your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, folks, it is Halloween for most of you listening, and Old Hallows Eve, and I didn't really talk a ton about that earlier tonight, but I'll definitely take your calls, thoughts, and comments on Halloween, any crazy Halloween stories you have. Listen to this crazy Halloween story, and we're going to get to your calls momentarily. A student ate a THC-infused candy handed out at a California school Halloween event and fell. The unidentified child became ill and needed medical attention after eating the candy at the Amelia Earhart Elementary School. just this weekend. The student ate a THC-infused candy. That's the main ingredient in marijuana. The candy was handed out at a Halloween event at the California elementary school, while 3 other families found more lace treats with marijuana in their kids' candy bags. The students ate a Kiva Lost Farm fruit chew, which looks strikingly similar to a Starburst. But in an image shared by police, the wrapper states the candy is infused with 10 milligrams of THC. 3 other families also found the fruity candy in their children's candy bags, according to the San Francisco Chronicle. There have been no reports that the other children actually ingested the candy. Alameda police are investigating the incident to determine where the candy came from at the PTA-sponsored event. They warned the public that many drug-infused candies strongly resemble the original sweets. I mean, there was a story about 6 months ago, 3 months ago maybe. I have time blindness, so they're all the same to me. But of a fentanyl bust where all the fentanyl looked like Skittles. And at the time, I was thinking, why would they do that? And I still don't know why they would do that. I guess they want to get younger and younger customers, but with the amount of people that are dropping dead from trying fentanyl, that's crazy. So now it's candy with weed in it. And again, I know adults do this stuff, and they're like, take half, take a quarter, because if you do the whole thing, you'll go nuts. So just imagine what this is doing to kids. The police department recommended that parents check their kids' candy prior to letting them enjoy and look for unusual packaging. I mean, all I could say is I'm old enough to remember when the only thing you had to look for in your kids' candy when I was a kid was razor blades and things like that. Now you've got to worry about drugs in your kids' candy. I mean, it's crazy. Some of the other candies that they have include Nerds that are medicated, Kit Kat wrappers that display a marijuana leaf, and others had slight changes to the brand names like Reefers Pieces instead of Reese's and Stony Patch instead of Sour Patch Kids. I mean, I guess it's funny, and if it's intended for adults that are looking to enjoy that, that's on them. But shouldn't be giving that to kids, and I guess that's the prank. But somebody's probably going to get in trouble, or maybe not. It's California. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on this and anything else that's on your mind. Let's see. Where do we go from here? Let's go to Don in Auburn, California. NCO. Don, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
I wanted to make a comment about the Hamas attack on Israel. I think that Iran worked with Hamas to fabricate this attack, and that it was especially brutal. And the reason was they wanted to draw Benjamin Netanyahu away from his stated goal of denying Iran the chance to have a hydrogen bomb. I think Iran's a lot closer to getting their bomb, and they only need about 1 month to do it. And this attack bought them a month.
It could be. I mean, it sounds like fair analysis. I don't have anything to prove it one way or the other, but I can say I think that's all tracking. I think the Iranians have been up to this for quite a while. They were 50% at 50%. I think the last I heard was 65% uranium enrichment for a nuclear weapon, and it makes sense what you're saying. I think it also is in line with what they're doing. They, I think there's maybe not a global hegemony, but they're definitely looking for a Middle Eastern hegemony of American hating actors like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like the Houthi rebels that are all out there kind of, free agents, but sharing the cause of hating America and hating Israel. So I don't think that you're too off track there. And let me ask you, you ever heard of kids going trick-or-treating and coming back with weed candy?
No, not with weed candy.
Yeah, me either. It's a first for me. Thanks for the call, Don. I appreciate it. Big shout out to California, KNCO. Big shout out to all of our friends on the West Coast listening in tonight. Let's continue. let's see, where was I going from here? Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Willimantic, Connecticut, WW2. Yeah, let's go to Mike. This is a good point here. Mike in Connecticut, WXLM. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, how you doing tonight? Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. Good, good. Hey, I just had a question. You know, with all the coverage there is these days, so everybody knows about everything that's going on. But, of course, back in World War II, there was really no coverage. How do you think things would have gone if there was coverage like there is today back then about us, like, you know, firebombing Berlin or dropping the H-bombs? People would have screamed and yelled about all the civilian casualties. You know, and it's just so it's just a totally different ballgame.
Well, Mike, I'm pretty sure that the newspapers back in that time, I agree that it's a different ballgame with the speed of information. But I think the New York Post, which is America's oldest newspaper, the New York Times, and others, I think they did cover this stuff. Although the New York Times has been labeled as a Holocaust denier for a very long time, because of them giving very soft coverage over the actual events that took place. But I think by and large, the news has always been out there, and news still gets around. I remember as a kid, we didn't really know much about what was going on in a lot of places, but my parents used to get, and my grandmother especially, part Panamanian, and she used to get letters from Panama. So it was interesting how that would happen, and she always stayed abreast of what was going on in Central America that way. So I think, you know, it wasn't as fast. We didn't have Twitter. Oftentimes we're looking for stuff to talk about on the radio, and if we hear a breaking news story, we're looking for, you know, a couple of different outlets to kind of corroborate the story before I talk about it on the air. And we'll be looking and say, no, I don't see anything yet from Associated Press or from NBC News or something like that. But this story will have been on Twitter for an hour with videos and photos and all sorts of analysis that's already, you know, an hour old before the media even gets it. So I think, yes, we're in a different age where it's a whole new ballgame. However, I think that there was still outrage, and, you know, you used World War II, but we can go no further than the Vietnam War. There were tons of anti-war protests, and we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have the internet. There was a lot of things we didn't have, and there were people that were up in arms. So I think there's always going to be information about wars, disinformation about wars, misinformation.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
In September, the Department of Homeland Security published the 2024 Homeland Threat Assessment, laying out the most direct, pressing threats to our security. Already, in the weeks since the assessment was published, the world has changed. Hamas terrorists horrifically attacked thousands of innocent men, women, and children in Israel on October 7th, brutally murdering, wounding, and taking hostages of all ages. In the days and weeks since, we have responded to an increase in threats against Jewish, Muslim, and Arab American communities and institutions across our country. Hate directed at Jewish students, communities, and institutions add to a pre-existing increase in the level of anti-Semitism in the United States and around the world.
That's Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas giving us the numbers and reading us the riot act on how lethal anti-Semitism is, and as if we couldn't see it by just watching the news. He's finally getting something sort of right here. But again, always late to the dance, if you will. And the FBI director today also echoed those sentiments, saying that there is let me see, I got the transcript right here. He says that it's not a time to panic, but a time for vigilance. We shouldn't stop conducting our daily lives, going to schools and houses of worship and so forth, but we should be vigilant. You often hear the expression, if you see something, say something. That's never been more true now, and that's probably partly why the American people are reporting, more tips and leads to us, and we're pursuing those threats and leads as vigorously as we possibly can. That's Christopher Wray, again, reiterating that it's a time to be concerned, and we're in a very dangerous period regarding what's going on with anti-Semitism and the Hamas Nazis that are out there not only trying to eliminate Israel, but they're taking to the streets all over America, mainly on college campuses. It's a pretty crazy thing. Let us go to Paul, Reading, Pennsylvania, WEEU. Paul, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Okay, I want to ask what you, not just you, but the people listening would do if you had to make almost an impossible decision. Eisenhower, to get D-Day landing, knew that almost all of our soldiers would die before others came and won the battle. What if you were President Truman and you could either drop atomic bombs twice, knowing you killed innocent people, or invade Japan, knowing that almost all of our soldiers would die going in at first, and we would kill not only the Japanese soldiers, but a lot of innocent people? Why I say these things are, if you were president, and don't worry about politics, and you would tell Netanyahu, well, you're taking a lot of time to get to Hamas, and a lot of people are being tortured by them, and so let's just let you drop the nuclear bomb on Hamas, killing most of them, and our own people kidnapped, and lots of Palestinians. What would you do, Rich?
Yeah, so Paul, I mean, again, I did an exercise like this in college once where I had to play the part of Harry Truman, and I did exactly what he did in response to the kamikaze attacks on Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked us. I said, you know what, it's time we attack them. And I think that was the appropriate response. We can always try to change history, but given the option to do it or not do it, I would do it. Netanyahu, I think, is showing remarkable restraint in trying to evacuate that area, has told them for now, I think it's 22 or 23 days now, get out of Dodge because we're coming in, and they just started coming in, and they've already taken out some of the Hamas leadership, but there's more to come. And, earlier today, and this might come as a joke to many of you or as a funny comment, but it's actually true. I don't have any hair, but I went to the barbershop today, and I saw a barber friend of mine, and he did my beard. I got a hot towel shave and all that. And I got to tell you that this came up in the conversation. He was like, I don't think anybody's right. I think both sides are guilty. It's terrible. People are dying. All of that's true. At least both sides are dying. That's true. I think in this particular conflict, and I think that's where it's easy for me to look at this conflict that way. I look at this like this. You can have a history with a neighbor of yours where they park in your driveway, they let their trees and weeds and stuff grow over onto your side of the property line, let's say. And this could be a very contentious neighborly relationship for many years. But I can only, in my opinion, to be fair, look at each individual instance. And I know that on October 7th, these guys used hang gliders and parachutes and whatnot to attack a bunch of kids in Israel that were at a music festival, and simultaneously went and raided a lot of these little kibbutz villages. And they kidnapped a 9-month-old baby. They kidnapped a 75-year-old woman. They kidnapped an 85-year-old woman. They've kidnapped so many people, innocent people. And not only did they kidnap them, they slaughtered many of them, over 1,000. I think the number is 1,400 people were slaughtered in cold blood, murdered. And, I've seen the images of these babies and moms that were holding their babies that were burnt alive, and you could see their charred remains. with their mouths open because they died in agony. And when I look at that, I say, if I'm Netanyahu, I think he's showing remarkable restraint. I would clearly have tried to level the place, but you can't do that because that's why you're president, right, or prime minister, and you've got to go in there and think of the hostages, and some of them are Americans, and America's your ally. So you've got to be very judicious and very surgical with your strikes, and I think that's what they're doing. Not let alone you're fighting a bad guy here, and the bad guy decides to make their main base of operations a tunnel that's beneath a hospital, the biggest hospital, right? So when you have people that are using civilians as human shields, and the civilians in the area already know, hey, look, you got to get out of Dodge, you're going to do everything you can to only focus on combatants, enemy combatants, not on civilians. But I believe the reality of life is, just like in any war we've ever fought, that's part of how it goes, and it's an unfortunate part of war, but it is. War is not this clean sport where, only the bad guys get get their hands dirty. A lot of people are going to suffer here, which is why you try to avoid a war. But the fact that they were attacked at that scale, at that magnitude, with more Israelis and Jews being killed in one day since the Holocaust, is something that can't be taken lightly. And in my opinion, Hamas has to be eradicated fully. This can't just be, hey, look, you came here, you killed some of our people, we'll kill some of your people, we'll call it a day. They'll do it again. This has to be a fight to the finish, in my opinion. You've got to eradicate Hamas the way that we went after ISIS, and by and large destroyed the power of that organization where they're not where they once were. And to me, that's the only option here, is to go after them. And I would use as much diplomacy as I can to get the Jordanians to open their borders, to get the Egyptians to open their borders and say, listen, your fellow Middle Easterners that are trying to seek refuge, let them out. But there's a lot of commentary, and we've talked about it on this program about, but the Israelis have cut off the water, they've cut off the power, it's inhumane. Again, Hamas has been in charge there for a very long time, and tens of millions of dollars have gone to them, and they still haven't done anything to provide their people with water. They haven't done anything to provide their people with electricity. So, I mean, if the Canadians attack the United States and the Canadians are in charge of our power, then shame on us, right? Shame on us if we're going to sit there and say, well, Canada's attacking us, but they turned off our water and our power. Well, hold on a second. Why is Canada in charge of your power, right? If you're the Palestinian Authority and there's a guy named Mahmoud Abbas and there's the Hamas leaders, and this is their own territory. And prior to Israel being in charge, the Jordanians were in charge and the Egyptians were in charge in Gaza. So I think there's a storied history here where things could have been different. And what we do know is that Israel has not been in charge of that region for more than a dozen years or whatever. So I think the bottom line here is the people need to look at what's going on and take it for what it is and get out of Dodge. And those that don't, and I understand that and I respect that. If my town were under siege, I think the last thing I would do is leave. I think I would say the captain goes down with the ship. I'm getting that white lithium grease for my guns, and we're going to town. But that would be my prerogative, and that would be something I'd be well aware of in the decision that I'm making. And I think many of them are making that decision. They're not leaving because they're trapped per se. I think many of them are not leaving because they believe in this mission. They believe in the eradication of this enemy that they call Israel, so that they can take all of their land from the river to the sea. And I think that's their goal. At least that's what I would do, Paul. Let me see. Well, I got to take a quick pause here, but we'll come back to your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, to the phones we go. We continue our trek across the country. Let's go to the middle of the country, Suffield, Ohio, WNIR, and check in with Robert. Robert, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead. Robert, going once, going twice. All right. Robert said that Hamas is there to destroy and to kill. I think he's right. We continue on our journey here. Let's see. Let's go to Rodney, Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Go right ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your program. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Two things. The illegal. It's my understanding that the immigration, however many millions, has come in now. It's illegal immigration. And point two, I've also heard what I believe are accurate reports on programs like yours, where you can hear the truth that. The illegals they're going to set it. They're setting them up as citizens and going to let them vote, and they vote Democrat. They're told to vote Democrat, and I believe these are accurate reports. So I'll leave it there and see if you have anything to say about it.
Sure. Yeah. Listen, I've heard speculation the same way. I don't know that this is entirely true, and the reason why is because I think when you're dealing with the immigrants that are coming in from like Cameroon or the Ivory Coast or Senegal, they may have a different set of values that are not congruent with American culture. However, I think when you look at some of the folks that are coming across the border from Central and South America, it's a different story. And I only say that because I think it's when you just look at the actual people coming through, when you look at the folks that are coming in from Northern Africa or from Asia, from China, these are all men that are relatively young. A lot of the folks coming from Central and South America are women and children, different MO. So while they come to the United States, I think that there is a strong possibility. And I only say this as somebody that is categorized by the left as brown. I think many brown people, or AKA Hispanic Latino, tend to have very, very conservative values. There's probably not a Hispanic household south of the border that you can go to have dinner at where they're not going to say grace, where there's probably not a crucifix or a statue of Jesus somewhere in the house, and where there's probably not a mom and a dad and dinner with kids around a table. Family values are a really big part of Hispanic culture. And the further and further away from family values that Democrats get is going to make it a lot easier for so many of these Hispanics they might vote their first couple of elections. Maybe they do get suckered into voting Democrat, but ultimately they're going to realize, you know what, I want to come and open a taco stand. I want to come and start a trucking business. I want to come and start a landscaping business. And when they start paying a ton of money on their earnings because they're now self-employed and they're paying at 39 or 45% with their tax rate, I think it makes it very easy to start listening to the conservative message and to the Republican position on these things. And I think that blows up in their face. However, I think people that are coming from war-torn countries, that are escaping that level of not just of poverty, but are coming by themselves, leaving their family behind, I think that's very different. As you can see, they're not even migrating, if you will, with their family. Oftentimes we see that at the southern border. However, so many of these families, quote-unquote families, air quotes, they're not families at all. They're kids that are being trafficked by smugglers. So I realize that's a thing, too. So, yeah, I agree that they're going to be told to vote Democrat. I just don't know if they can rely long-term on a lot of the Hispanic ones that are coming across. I think some of the others perhaps so, especially if they're just single men. And that begs the next question. Why are there so many single men coming across the border? Anyway, we're going to get to the rest of your calls and more in the speed round coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Welcome back. It's the speed round. Let's go to Al, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, WRNN. Al, very quickly, go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. Last week you had a bunch of people calling in about talking about the shooting, this MK Ultra thing. It is a mind control situation. We're being set up. They're shooting a lot of people because they want to say guns are bad. They want to take your guns so they can coincide with the attacks they're going to have set up with all these military-age males coming from the third world.
That's entirely possible. Again, one could read the tea leaves and see that happening. I don't per se think that's necessarily the case right this second, but it wouldn't surprise me if that were the case in the long term. Makes a lot of sense when you just look at history as your guide. You'll see that they disarm the population, they being whoever the actors are that are trying to gain control. And we look at Hitler created Reichstag, and many people recently, Hamas blew up their own hospital. Sometimes people will do that to gain sympathy from other people. And I could totally see a situation, while it may sound far-fetched, I could see a situation where they utilize, the old technology of MK Ultra, and however it exists today. They say they haven't used it since 1960. Okay, I'm supposed to take your word for it. You can't even keep a border closed. So, yeah, I told, they lied about COVID. They lied about this. Why aren't they lying about that? I'm open to having that discussion. And ultimately, sure, why not? Rahm Emanuel once said, you never let a good crisis go to waste. And not that I condone any mass shootings or I think those are good crises. No, not at all. But I could see how the left and the gun control crowd will pounce on that to say, this is exactly why we got to take AR-15s away. This is exactly why you shouldn't have a gun. This is exactly why, and just push that agenda. And, of course, should something happen with sleeper cells that Ray and others are saying are a real possibility here on American soil, then guess what? We're all screwed. So, Al, I'm with you. I can't say I know for sure what you're saying is a fact, but if what you're saying is true, it makes sense, and we need to be prepared regardless. Sarah and Ken, sorry I didn't get to you. We ran out of time on the clock, but call in on Thursday night. I'll get to you right away. Folks, remember, tomorrow we're playing the greatest hits. I hope you tune in for that. It's going to be a great show, and I'm looking forward to being with you. Until then, hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless. I am Rich Valdez.